a Playlyst original.
Welcome to the Pilot Podcast,
where we review the pilot episodes of TV shows to answer your question, should I watch this?
My name is Mitu.
And my name is BJ.
And this week, we're watching Skeleton Crew on Disney+.
So stay tuned to find out if Mitu would ever skip class for an adventure.
You can really stop it at skip class, but we can all be surprised at the end of the answer at that.
Okay, while we ponder that very easy-to-guess answer, can you tell us about this show?
Young dreamer Wim, played by Ravi Cabot-Conyers, his bestie Neel, played by Robert Timothy Smith, and Racing Rebels Fern, played by Ryan Kira Armstrong, and KB, played by Kiriana Crowder, accidentally find themselves lost in space following a discovery by Wim, and now they're desperately trying to get home.
Very exciting premise, and we need to start the conversation by reminding our listeners here at the Pilot Podcast, we only watch the pilot episode. And Disney did do a 2-episode double premiere, but we're only focusing on episode 1.
And based on that, I think that in this episode, we spent too much time getting to know these 4 kids. I feel like that was missing from my summary, that these are children. We only get toward the Star Wars-y space part as a light spoiler toward the end of this first episode. And clearly the point was for it to be packaged as a premiere, a 2-episode premiere. But for a nearly 50-minute pilot, for there to not be a little bit more space and more action felt like an odd decision to me. We spent a lot of time in school with them, which obviously is rendered irrelevant once they are lost in space.
It was an interesting choice. I think they were going for the 2-hour or maybe like hour-and-a-half mini movie type of vibe. But even then, spending half of that with them riding the bus, taking exams,
yes,
getting in trouble with teachers is an odd way to introduce us to the story. And it doesn't immediately feel very Star Wars-esque besides aliens and robots.
Yes, it's very coming of age. And in this town, the kids seem lonely.
Very lonely. Some absent parents or parents who are just very busy with work. So these kids are raised by droids.
They're taught by droids. They're riding on the buses driven by droids. Except for Neel. Neel has a loving home.
Neel has 2 loving parents, siblings, a crush at school. He's really good at school. I think Neel is happy where he's at.
If I were Neel and Wim, aptly named because he goes by his Wim, if he got me on this spaceship and then accidentally set it off and got me lost in space and I have this lovely life at home, the way I would never speak to Wim again. I would only coordinate or cooperate to get back. Like, that is the only reason for conversation until we figure out how to turn this ship around.
Wim is your best friend.
Okay.
And to be fair, Wim is a dreamer. He's reading stories about Jedi. He wants to explore the world. We see that he doesn't have a mother, and that his father just doesn't have time for him anymore. So I think he is seeking anything that can be exciting versus Neel, who has everything he wants at home.
That's true. It was sad to see Wim interact with his father because obviously his father cares. But in this culture, like you said, it appears the parents are kind of like, the droids got it, we're good. And so Wim and his dad kind of feel like roommates. At one point, there's a scene where his dad is like, I have a really busy week coming up. And he just drops a bunch of coins in front of Wim. And he's like, that's money for your lunch for the whole week because I just won't be home. And to your point about Wim loving stories, he was like, can we read one together, before I go to sleep? And then his dad was like, I think you're a little too old for that. Like, truly, they are roommates.
Exactly. The priority is do well in school. In this episode, they have a career assessment. So even at what seems like a young age, like these are middle school age kids, maybe even a little younger, they're already trying to figure out what their job is going to be in the New Republic.
That's true. Though a lot of countries do career track like that. where your high school, your university is dependent on your test scores.
Wow, that's stressful because we knew a lot of people even in college who didn't know what they wanted to do.
100%. So it is wild to think about like that kind of culture of figuring out how to sort yourself sooner. And, you know, you could pro-con it, right? Versus like the amount of lost liberal arts majors that we went to college with, me included. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So, you know, maybe the New Republic and like a lot of the Eastern and Western world got it right with that. But we do see him feeling a lot of pressure going into this test, especially because he's dreaming bigger than his dad's job of analyst. He wants to be a Jedi. And or he wants to do something where he solves like a world issue, a planet-wide issue. He wants to be bigger than what his dad is.
Yeah, he wants to be a hero. He wants to stop bad in the world. And apparently in such a bureaucratic society, that's not really an issue. They said they have droids that handle that. So I guess they have cop droids and they don't need people cops. Which that also seems stressful, but whatever.
And then on the other side with Fern and KB, we have Fern as extremely smart. Mm-hmm. They're both scrappy. The kids make fun of them because they maybe don't have the best racing bikes or access to the best materials to do their racing. And it almost seems like a similar dynamic to Wim and Neel, where KB seems like kind of the nice, supportive friend to Fern.
Yeah, that's a good point. Wim and Fern are our go-getters, big personality, adventure seekers, while KB and Neel, they seem like really loyal, level-headed sidekicks.
And I think that'll make a really interesting dynamic as they figure out life on the ship. I wish we had gotten a little hint into that beyond a couple scenes in this first episode when they're getting to know each other as they're understanding this discovery that Webb made. We see a little bit of discord when Wim doesn't like that Neel agrees with Fern and KB on something. He's like, you're siding with the girls. And I think that there's potential for there to be a lot more dust-ups like that in the future on the ship as like alliances shift and ideas shift.
I think that's definitely going to happen. There's going to be that balance. And I feel like Wim and Fern will be the two forces kind of pulling this group in different directions.
Yeah.
Where KB and Neel are going to have to navigate the big personalities.
And they're going to have issues internally. So there's a small scene where Neel asks Wim, you know, you didn't even ask me how my assessment went. And, you know, because Wim was just so caught up in what he had going on. And thankfully, Neel did well because he's just leading such a fruitful and full life. But, you know, it's a sign of maybe they'll want their very achievement-oriented friends to check in with them more. So I think there's some potential there for some like intra-bestie conflict.
That's true, because this whole adventure really is something Wim wants and wants for Neel. And we also see Fern, who I think is a little more collected and calm and rational than Wim, but she also and smarter, but she also is fine leaving her home behind. Versus KB, we're not sure how she feels about, you know, leaving your planet, potentially.
That's true. Fern does not like the planet. She is always seeking entertainment on her planet. She said that it's boring. And we get a slight hint in a line toward the end of the episode that maybe this planet is also just a little bit isolated.
Yes, it seems that space is not as well known to these kids as it seems to be in other Star Wars media. So there's a little mystery there. And a scene that we skipped early in this pilot is that we learned that there are space pirates. So it's going to be dangerous out there.
And I think we get into the pirating a little bit more in the second half of the premiere. That's what I understand from the reviews of the two-parter.
Yes, because if you look up this show, you'll see the poster, you'll see the cast list. Jude Law plays a character named Jod Na Nawud. And I will just say, I think we have seen him in the pilot, but not explicitly.
And I was intrigued by that first scene in the pilot with a little hint into this pirate world. I wish we had had maybe a couple more flashbacks to that scene or something in this first episode to bring in a little bit more action versus the amount of time we spent in an exam room.
It's a very different take for a Star Wars adventure where we're not seeing lightsabers and force powers and space battles. Instead, we're seeing children figuring out school and studying and getting lost in the woods.
That's true. And I will say that despite it not feeling very Star Wars-y, for a coming-of-age story, I thought that the kids were such great actors.
All charming.
So charming.
I think Neel's my favorite. Do you have a favorite?
Obviously, Neel, who doesn't deserve to be lost in space.
You're really trying to defend and protect Neel.
He has a family at home waiting for him. He did really well in that exam. He has career prospects.
We at least know Wim and Fern have families waiting for them.
Yes, but not as engaged as Neel's. Neel's had like a cheering section when he walked into that house. They were like, yes, you're back again. We love you.
Oh, now you're making me feel worse for Wim and Fern, who I'm sure would love a cheering section.
They would. Maybe they wouldn't have gotten lost in the forest and then lost in space had their parents cheered for them just a little bit more.
That's the lesson at the heart of all of this. Parents, cheer on your kids.
Absolutely.
So me too. Now that we've learned the lesson of Star Wars Skeleton Crew on Disney Plus, will you watch more episodes?
I would watch again casually. I'm not a big Star Wars person. I think if you are not a big Star Wars person, this is probably not the one to bring you in. But if you enjoy a YA story, a coming-of-age adventure, I think this one might be fun for you because it is really well made. It just doesn't feel particularly spacey in this first episode. Also, if you're Jude Law Hive, this is the time of year where we're all watching The Holiday, for example. Perhaps you would want to enjoy this one as well.
Similarly, I'm interested. I would put this as a would watch again casually. I think if you like Star Wars, it's worth checking out, even though it doesn't feel very Star Wars-esque in this first episode. But I think we will get more of that as we venture into space and meet more characters. And I think it's a nice change of pace to have, as you said, the coming-of-age story where we don't really look at how children are in the Star Wars universe. So it'll be interesting to see them go on an adventure and interact with potential adult dangers. Like, how are they going to navigate that? Because they're still kids.
And the adults are the dangers.
Yes, those space pirates were all adults.
They're in for a journey.
Well, me too. The question is, would you go on that journey? Would you skip class for an adventure?
No, I have never skipped class. No, I skipped class in college one time ever to interview for a job.
Oh, never mind. I thought you were going to say our freshman year, the basketball team won the national championship. And when they returned to campus, a lot of people skipped class to go see them.
No, I did not skip class for that. I was in class, empty classrooms. The only time I ever skipped class in college was senior year to interview for a job. And even then, I was so racked with guilt that I took my teacher aside the next time I went and I told her why and I told her what happened. And you know when like you can tell someone just absolutely does not care about what you're saying? Like I fully saw the light go out behind her eyes and I was like, okay, she doesn't care. I need to let this go. Like, obviously, I'm the one holding the guilt here.
Yeah, she said, I probably didn't even notice she was gone. Like, whatever.
And then in high school, you were allowed to basically not attend afternoon classes or something. If I can remember correctly, during like AP exams or final exams. Basically, I think if you had over a certain grade in a class, a certain score, you could skip the finals, skip the final lectures, something. I genuinely cannot remember the rules anymore, but I was just allowed to go chill.
I don't think that counts.
Yeah, that was like a school policy.
Yeah.
So
if your school said you may leave, it's not skipping.
Yeah. But you know me, just a rebel without a cause.
And maybe that's why you haven't been rebelling, because you don't have a cause yet.
No, I've never been lost in space.
Yet.
Mm-hmm.
It can happen. We'll see. I'll work on it.
I know you will.
I don't like that tone. But if you want to hear better tones, check out more episodes of the Pilot Podcast at our website, thepilotpodcast.com, and you can follow us on all of your favorite podcast platforms.
You can also follow us on social media at The Pilot Pod, and you can send thoughts, feelings, show recommendations, because every other week, just like this one, we do a show recommended by you, our wonderful listeners, to askthepilotpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.
Bye.